Hello and welcome up to Rise Up with Orion's podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited, however, a little hesitant to already start talking about the holidays. And I'm sure our expert, Lindsay, she might be in the same boat. As I
Oh
look out
yeah.
the window, it's beautiful and it's fall, but I'm not sure I'm ready to talk about it yet. But we're going to do it anyways. So let me introduce you to our expert. And I am so honored to be able to work with Lindsay. She is one of our Orion health coaches who has a bachelor's degree in exercise science and a master's degree in nutrition and functional medicine. She also has a certification in culinary nutrition and teaches plant-based cooking classes on the side. We were just talking about a potential podcast, so keep your ears out. She enjoys coming up with new recipes for people with specific dietary needs, such as food allergies and chronic health conditions. With her free time, she enjoys going on hikes with her dog, cooking, playing video games, and board games with her family and friends. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining our podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
And I know you have so much knowledge to share, but I think a lot of people, when they hear plant based, we've touched on this in our podcast before, but it's really, really intimidating. So I would love for you to share your journey going plant based and kind of, just clue people into why this is now one of your passions.
Absolutely. So, my journey starts by actually going vegan about 8 years ago. And that can be a little confusing because a lot of people think of vegan and plant-based as kind of the same thing. Veganism is the lifestyle, and it's mainly for ethical environmental reasons. Nothing to do with diet. Diet just happens to be the biggest part of veganism. And so I did that just because I was an animal lover and I went through a few experiences that just kind of opened my eyes, and it was difficult for me, and I kind of went cold turkey. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
ever recommend the cold turkey route. And it was very difficult for the first couple of years. It's hard for relationships because when you make the transition, then
Mm-hmm.
the spouse, even though my husband was so incredibly supportive, I didn't know what to cook anymore. And that you don't realize how much food has an impact on everything you do throughout your day. And if
Mm-hmm.
if now it becomes something that you have to think about more than you were thinking about already before, it can add stress. And that's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of the first couple of years of my journey was increased stress, poor diet. I ate a lot of processed foods because I didn't know what to eat. I would buy a lot of the freezer meals. 8 years ago, there weren't as many plant-based
Mm-hmm.
options. And
Yeah.
so there was a lot of emotional things that I went through. I didn't really understand habits. I didn't understand the behavioral side of any of this. I just knew I couldn't eat animal products anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
put that shame on myself as well. I said, not only that I couldn't, but I shouldn't. Like it was a bad
Right.
thing. And so it was not a healthy transition, just right off the bat. So I didn't do it for health, but my health started to struggle. And I started to realize that people kept asking me, "Oh, you can't get all the nutrients on a plant-based diet." And I'm just like, "Well, absolutely you can," as I'm eating my microwave frozen meal for the third time that day, because I was struggling. So I was just like, I got to make a change at this point. And so my shift started when I was trying to figure out how to prove people wrong that you could be healthy on a
Mm-hmm.
plant-based diet. So I actually took a course called from the Academy of Culinary Nutrition. It's a Canadian-based course, but it's fully online. And I started to learn how to cook from a nutrition perspective. Most of it was mostly plant-based. It was all gluten-free. It was a complete like 180 from what I was experiencing, and I started to learn how to cook. And my eyes were opened where before I felt completely restricted. And after
Mm-hmm.
that course, I was just like, holy cow, there's so much food out there that I had never even didn't even know existed.
Mm-hmm.
And like I probably had never eaten a lentil in my life. Never heard of a
Yeah,
red
right.
lentil before. Yeah. And I'm 20 something years old and I'm like, lentils? What are those?
Huh. Uh-huh.
And so really eye-opening. And that's kind of where it started, where I was like, oh, okay. So I developed a passion for the nutrition side. Um, but I also realized that just because you know the nutrition side doesn't mean it makes it any easier to do the nutrition
Mm-hmm.
side. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's when the behavioral stuff started to kick in, where I'm just like, how do I start implementing these changes into my diet? How do I deal with making meals that are going to satisfy myself and my husband because he's not plant-based? How do I make sure that I don't feel completely, are we still on? Are you there? I can't hear you if you are there. Hmm. You can see and hear me. Okay. Well, cool. That is great. I wonder if it was just Tara's end. Let me see something. Just keep swimming. Okay. Well, I will keep going and hopefully we are doing okay. I can see that it's recording. Hopefully she'll be able to jump back on. Okay, perfect. So that is kind of part of my journey, was learning on the behavioral side, and I developed a passion for nutrition, but mainly from the behavioral side. And so I decided to go, okay. She just reached back to me. Her laptop just shut down. So she is coming back shortly. And so just wrapping that up, I got my master's degree in nutrition and functional medicine because I wanted to have that education behind me. And that education um, has been able to help me to help other people be able to focus on the behavioral side, but having that knowledge from the education. So that is my journey, and I will wait for Tara to hop back on so that we can work on the next question, see if she's got any follow-ups. Thank you guys for letting me know that you can still see and hear me.
So awesome. So awesome.
Hi,
I'm
Tara.
here. I have no idea. Anyways, I'm glad we're recording again. So, the joy of technology.
I don't
So
think it
she's
stopped
plant-based and
recording.
she's successful and she is a health coach and she didn't even know how to change habits. And now look at you go. So I'm assuming you finished your personal story.
Yeah, I did. After I started to realize that it was like that you had left, people said they could still hear me, so I just kept
Oh,
going.
fantastic. Good,
Mhm.
good, 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 good. Well, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Since you went through your journey, and it's interesting because I kind of think about my husband's journey with, celiacs and, me really adapting our whole life, to adapt to that and how
Yeah.
difficult it is because just like you, I think it's kind of funny you said cold turkey because no pun intended, right?
No
You did
pun
think
intended.
that's
Yep.
funny. But again, we kind of did the same thing, completely cold turkey. Um, and as I think about, shifting to this, the holidays are a really tough time. They're a tough time for everybody. Um, so again, are we absolutely crazy to think about adapting, a more plant-based nutrition plan around the holidays? What's your thought?
No, yeah, I don't think it's crazy. And I think in regards to your husband's situation, that's a little tricky because celiacs, you kind of have to go cold turkey, at least for him, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not gonna be a pleasant experience for him. And he's already struggling. So that's a little bit different, especially when he's uh there's an actual medical reason to make the shift.
Hmm.
But for the
Yeah.
holidays, I think it's a great time, if I'm being honest, because it helps us to be aware how many animal products are in everything that we eat and how
Hmm.
it's not completely necessary. I would say for the holidays, more importantly to me than animal products is sugar.
Mm-hmm.
uh, because the sugar content just goes up and everything. Sugar, yeah. So that's a complete side story. But if you try to incorporate a more plant-based diet and you try to avoid eggs and butter are basically in all of the sugar
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Sure.
ingredients. So I think it's a great time. I just think that we have to think about the emotional side and the social side and all the things that come with the holidays
Mm-hmm.
because it's mostly not about the food so much as the habits that we have, the traditions that we have, the culture that we're experiencing that the food just comes along with.
Right.
Speaking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the social environment and food brings people together, right? So of course it kind of goes hand in hand. And I love that we're rolling into Halloween and just almost a week and a half, just a short
oh
week
my
away.
goodness, yeah.
So it's crazy. And I know for me, Halloween kind of starts that train of events and social commitments and all of that. And because of all that change, unfortunately, we just kind of let it happen and we let nutrition just kind of fly out the window because of what you just said. It's
Yep.
habits, it's tradition, and it's all of that. So how do we take back control of that? So we're thinking about this, we're intrigued, with trying some new things. What is your suggestion on how we can take back control of the craziness of the holidays that's coming our way?
Sure. I might jump back just a little bit because in order to take control, we really have to understand what we've lost control of.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, with the holiday seasons comes increased stress. And so I want to also point out that there are things happening to our body with increased stress that actually cause increased imbalance of hormones, increased cortisol levels, which increases our appetite specifically for foods that are palatable, sugar, fat, and salt. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have to keep in mind that your body is also kind of working against you when the holidays come up because you're naturally experiencing increased stress.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be increased resistance to making changes because there's increased cravings. Whereas just on a normal month that not a lot of stuff is going on, you're not going to be experiencing that much. So
Mm-hmm.
be aware of that and be able to accept that that is just going to be a part of it and not to put too much expectations on yourself to feel like you have to be perfect in that because
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a process. It didn't take you a year to get to this point. It took you however old you are
Right.
to get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that is one of the things to take into consideration when thinking about how do we take control back. And that could be not diet related at all. It could be my stress levels are up the roof. And this is
Mm-hmm.
why, as I put all these expectations on myself to be perfect and to make sure that we have a party every week or that
Mm-hmm.
my kids are on time for everything and that I'm focusing on my kids that I want them to be happy and have good holidays. So
Mm-hmm.
things like that could be something to consider is where are your stress levels at? Maybe we should work on that first. And that can help
Yep.
your body start working for you instead of against you so much.
Right. Exactly. We talked about on the podcast a little while ago as well as is sleeping as well. I am very much the
Mhm.
sleep nerd. So again, making sure that we're getting the sleep so we can think consciously and make the right
Exactly.
choices. Very, very important. So again, as you had mentioned, again, we're taking steps, rather than trying to go cold turkey plant-based for the holidays, it's making the small adjustments. And you've mentioned it, and I love the word being intentional. So in your mind, what does it mean to be intentional when it comes to our food choices, our nutrition choices?
Yeah, I love this. I use this all the time in my conversations with people, in my coaching, and because being intentional is really redefining what success is.
Mhm.
When in one situation, we might define success as not eating sugar at all today. And another situation would be rather than eating 6 cookies today, I had 4 or something like that. And you were
Mhm.
intentional about your decision rather than reactive. So you think about the opposite of intentional. The opposite of intentional is making a reactive decision. There's a lot of steps that our brain goes through when we make decisions. And the first one is that there's a need.
Mhm.
There's some sort of need that we're experiencing. And if you're being reactive, you jump straight from need to action. Need to, I'm hungry, eat the closest thing that's in front of
Yeah.
my face. Yeah. And so that would be reactive. Intentional would be adding a bunch of steps in the middle where I have a need, where I feel stressed and I feel like I need some immediate comfort and
Mm-hmm.
relaxation.
Mm-hmm.
And then identifying what your ideal self would do in that situation and maybe writing a list and thinking of alternatives to those things as well. Just being like, recognizing you have options. There are a
Mm-hmm.
ton of options, and it doesn't just have to be the first thing that comes to your head. The first thing that comes to your head is usually the one that you've gone to in the past. So keep that in mind. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so learning to be intentional is going to take some effort. And that is going to require you to really give yourself options. And then after you've given yourself options at the end, say, what is the best option for me in the situation that I'm currently in?
Mm-hmm.
And that might not be your ideal self option. That might not be what you would do in a situation where you were not stressed. But
Mm-hmm.
because you are stressed, what is the best decision for you in that moment? And that would be those would be my steps to making any intentional decision really, but specifically when you're trying to make nutrition and health and wellness decisions.
Yes, and as I think about it too, so much for myself is kind of the fore planning that goes with that. Again, if
Mhm.
I'm trying to make better eating choices, well, I need a plan for that, and make sure that the list is accordingly, make sure I have the food, not the Doritos or the chocolate. I have to be able to have those foods in order to be intentional. So again, there is
Yep,
some forethought and planning that goes into that as well.
I agree. And I would say especially for plant-based. So a lot of people will think plant-based and kind of have an idea what that means. One
Mm-hmm.
of my favorite things about the plant-based diet is because it's so customizable. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just black and white. It's what is plant-based to you. And for some people it could mean I don't want to eat any animal products at all. For some people it's I honestly, for some people it's once a week, take a Monday throughout the week
Yeah.
and call that your meatless Monday. And
Mm-hmm.
I would consider that plant-based. Maybe not a lot of people would, but any sort of step to incorporate more plants and non-animal products into your diet is plant-based. So identify what that means to you because that's going to be huge in your ability to make decisions throughout the holidays. Is
Yeah.
knowing what it means to you so that you don't feel like you're never actually achieving it, if that makes sense.
Yes. Well, and I think, it's great that there is a lot of gray area in between that. And, especially coming from someone who is plant-based, who did go, full on one side of that, it's okay to be in the gray area. And maybe, eating butter and eggs is okay to you, versus, the red meat, bacon, all of that stuff. So again, I think that's fantastic that it isn't a one size fits all. And there is some gray area. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
And you can change it later, which is
Hmm.
what I've done, right? I've
Yeah.
I've went from being completely strict with myself to now I allow myself to eat animal products on occasion, and it's
Right.
intentional. And it's
Hmm.
I don't have to feel bad about it. And because I know what my personal values are and my personal goals, and as long as those are all aligning and I've made that decision, then it's okay.
Hmm.
And so I would say for my mental health, that has been incredibly beneficial. And recognizing that your mental and emotional health comes first.
Hmm.
Um, your physical health kind of comes along with your mental and emotional health. And so not thinking of those as two separate things.
Yes.
They go hand in hand. So,
Yes. And you mentioned at the very beginning of our podcast too, because I'm trying to kind of create a mental list for myself on, how I could make this successful and how I could make this a reality for myself. And I'm sure many of our listeners are doing that as well. So one of the things you mentioned is taking a small step and being intentional. What about kind of a support network? How do other people play in? It sounded like your husband was right there with you, but it was definitely not easy. So talk to
mhm.
me about the role of kind of a support network when you're trying to make a big change.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, honestly, with a lot of the people that I talk to, I would even be kind of an exception to most people, where a lot of the times partners or family members can be working against you and not be
Yeah.
supportive. And that can make it really, really difficult. So when finding a support group, I mean, obviously there's a lot on social media. There's a lot
Hmm.
of blogs, there's a lot of YouTube videos and things like that. But I would I would even go as far as even looking for uh, a professional or a health coach or somebody, even if it's just a short period of time that kind of aligns with your values, that can really help you work through all of that resistance and to be like,
Hmm.
okay, because a lot of the times we're our worst critics. And so having
Hmm.
somebody else there to say, okay, you've got this value, you've got this value, you've got this value. You're holding this value a lot higher than some of the others, and maybe we need to balance those out a little bit.
Hmm.
And then once you're on track with that, then using friends and family can be beneficial. Friends and family might not be super helpful at first unless they have gone through the same thing as you and are willing to kind of walk through the hard times.
Right.
Not all friends and family are willing to go through work through a lot of the resistance.
Hmm.
And even when you're looking, a lot of the plant-based stuff is food related, finding some of the plant-based stuff online that is more support group related.
Hmm.
Uh, that because I can tell you from personal experience, most of them, if you're just looking for plant-based groups, are judgmental and have a
Ah.
tendency to be judgmental. Where if
Hmm.
you're trying to make a food decision and you're like, I'm really trying to make this transition, but I haven't gone 100% all the way yet. How can I do it? People will give advice, but it's not genuine advice. It's just, well, you can try you can try the meat replacements and they taste
Hmm.
exactly the same and they taste amazing. And
Yeah.
so you might get some good advice, but for the most part, I would try to find someone who can listen and give
Yes.
genuine advice. So
Well, and I'm sure you navigated some of this as well as you turned plant-based overnight. Well, what seemed like overnight, I'm sure.
it did,
How
yeah.
did you navigate that going into the holidays? Obviously, there's tricky family social interaction. So how did you navigate being plant-based in those holiday situations with your family as you're
Sure.
bringing a meat
Yeah.
replacement to the dinner table or something? I mean, how did you navigate that?
Yeah. So I would try to not bring any meat replacements to the dinner table.
Mhm.
And because they're very, what's the word? You have to adjust your taste buds to a lot of them, and they're
Right.
not exactly the same. So I would try to bring dishes that were already mostly plant-based and
Mhm.
just maybe make a little tweaks to them.
Yeah.
And I mean, even stuffing, you can make a good stuffing that you can increase the nutrition on without having animal products, and it's really, really
Mhm.
good. So
Yeah.
trying, don't bring a faux turkey or like faux meat for everybody. But just try to find something that's already plant-based. And my family kind of that you might run into the fact where they're like, well, what can this person bring? Because they're plant-based right now, and they'll probably tell you to bring the salad.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many salads I brought to events,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that's completely fine. Usually I'll bring a salad and then something more hearty.
Mhm.
One of my favorites, and I don't know if there's going to be something that we hand out to people, but I can also like share some recipes. But one of my favorites is um, a lentil loaf.
Mm.
And it's not a meat replacement. It's very similar. But I've had people just really, really love that. Or a butternut squash mac and cheese that's just really
Oh,
flavorful
yeah.
and
Mhm.
hearty. You want something that's hearty and not just a salad. For for
Yes,
you
it's something that's
for
gonna keep
your
you
sake.
full for
For your
sure.
sake. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's okay as well for you to eat some animal products when you go to your event. Just be intentional as well.
Mhm.
Um, because it can be hard socially to not be able to enjoy all of the foods that everyone else is.
Right. Exactly. It makes me giggle a little bit because I remember when I was in college, my parents were gonna try something new and they were gonna have a turducken, a turkey stuffed with a duck, stuffed with a chicken. Like, and now it seems absolutely horrible. And I'm sure you're squirming out of your skin even thinking about that. But of course, they thought that it
Oh,
was such a great idea. And as I'm thinking about, my lifestyle now that I'm not in college anymore, I'm like, what an interesting, we needed a salad with that. We needed, a lentil loaf. to wash that down for sure.
Yep. And it's interesting too. It's you can't ever force your values on anybody else.
Hmm.
And some people learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
I encourage people to not learn that the hard way, to
Hmm.
just recognize that your values are yours. And I've even had family members now, when I go to events, that they're having more plant-based options because they're seeing the value in it for themselves.
Yeah.
I almost never, ever talked about it with other people. They just knew that I was plant-based and I brought my stuff and I ate my stuff.
Hmm.
And I would never talk to them about it unless
Right.
somebody specifically asked. And now 8 years later, they're asking me
Uh-huh.
questions
Yes.
about it. And so it's magical. It takes a long time, and sometimes it can be difficult to not share everything. But it can, the magic and patience and waiting and just loving other people for who they are and not judging them for their food choices as
Right.
well.
Well, and where we are now versus 8 years ago as well. I mean, it is, you know, really kind of commonplace. Like you're seeing it all over the place, and
Hmm.
restaurants are really conscious of it as well. So I think it's like celiacs and going gluten free. It's become so much easier to be able to do that as long as you're willing to navigate and seek the knowledge and talk to the right people, which
Yeah,
kind
and
of
it's a
leads. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. I was going to say it's just a great skill to learn
Hmm.
is to cook
Yeah.
more plant-based and gluten-free. And I can't tell you how many events that I've gone to where the host of the event comes up to me and says, "Thank you for bringing this option," because I had 3 people that came in that were allergic to this or that couldn't have gluten or that were vegetarian and didn't have any other options. And
Hmm.
now they come to me and say, "Yay, Lindsay, what are you going to bring for the vegetarian option this time?"
Yeah.
And so it's a really great skill to learn because when you kind of go on that journey, you learn what it feels like to be kind of left out of a situation. And so people that have gluten intolerances or celiac, they
Hmm.
go into a situation and they want to eat the food, but they
Hmm.
can't. And it just gives you a little bit more empathy for all
Yeah,
of the
for
people
sure.
that come in and can't enjoy the foods that everyone else is. So
Yeah. So we talked about seeking knowledge and seeking support. So where would you start? So if you want to make plant-based a reality right now, moving into the holidays, what are some simple tips, from your kitchen, from your world that you should suggest people start with now? In addition, like I said, to seeking knowledge and support.
absolutely. We talked about this earlier, but I always say step one is identify what a plant-based diet means to you.
Hmm.
Write it down. And then taking a second step is write the steps on how you're going to get there. So you think about all of the little things that need to happen in order for you to actually get to where you want to go. And you realize it's not I just have to do it.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of things that can help and then I need to adjust in my life to get there. And then once you've written that list down, pick one to start working on. And that redefines your success is it's just, okay, I'm not quite at the fully plant-based that I want to be at, but I'm working towards this first step. And then that's my current goal. And
Hmm.
then celebrate when you've accomplished it. And then move on to the next step. And as far as food goes, this is something that I would tell people no matter what, if it's not a plant-based diet or whatever adjustment you're making, is one meal a week, no more than two.
Hmm. Right.
Um, because the more you trying to implement different skills and strategies and foods that you're not familiar with, if the more you set yourself up for failure. And maybe like if you try to do 5 nights a week, 3 of those nights end up turning into a disaster and you didn't enjoy the meal. And then you're less motivated to do it again the next day.
Sure.
Versus if you're just doing 1 or 2 and you're having a lot more successes, it's going to build your confidence, build your motivation to be able to increase it next time.
Hmm.
One, max 2 new meals throughout the week.
Yeah. Yeah. And I often think about kind of depletion as well. If you remove the things that you love, it
Hmm.
takes so much of the joy out of it, and you want it even more. If you take the chocolate
Yep.
cake out of your life and you're a chocolate cake person, eventually you're gonna give in.
Yep. Oh yeah. And it'll come back harder than it was before.
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. Yes. We do not want to torture ourselves, especially over the holidays. I mean, that's not the time to do it.
Not at all.
Especially with, depletion and all of that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a time that should be enjoyable, right? There's obviously increased stress, but
Mhm,
we increase the stress because we're looking forward to the actual events that are going to happen.
mhm.
And we should be able to not only look forward to them, but enjoy them.
Right.
So, not putting ourselves, setting ourselves up to be in a situation where we're going to be miserable.
Yes, right. And to be so anxious just going into it because we've made a change. And one I would love to
Mhm.
throw in there as well is to allow yourself the grace of, enjoying, a slice of turkey or that, crazy family stuffing that you have always loved for generations. Again, allowing yourself the grace to enjoy some of those things. I think, we need to be kind to ourselves as well. um, so
Absolutely.
it doesn't make things worse.
Yeah, I want to hear more yeses in your head than nos.
Hmm.
I don't want you to feel like you have to go to the event and be like, no, I can't have this. No, I can't have this. No, I can't have this.
Oh,
Um, it's I'm choosing not to have this. I'm choosing not to have this. I am choosing to have a little bit of this, and the
hmm.
rest of my choices are these. So changing the word can't to choose already
Uh-huh.
starts to help you feel a little bit more positive,
Hmm.
rather than kind of beating yourself up about it and making those intentional decisions. And it's, yeah, as long as you're making them intentionally and not reactively, then you're moving forward in the right
Right.
direction. Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. The the need to straight pumpkin pie in your mouth with nothing in between. I totally get that. With whipped cream, of course.
You can't
Um,
have it without whipped cream.
yeah,
No.
just not the same. So Lindsay, we are going to put some resources in the show notes for our podcast. So I
Okay.
would love for you to share some of your resources that you love, or I know you have many personal personal resources you bring to the table. So can you share with us some of those, and our listeners can gather those from the recording as well as the show notes.
Absolutely. So I have a few blogs that I just pretty much swear by. They're just amazing. And one of them is Rainbow Plant Life. She just brings a huge energy to the plant-based world that you don't see in a lot of other places. She's Indian. So if you like Indian style food, she makes a lot of plant-based, authentic Indian food. And she has her parents come on to do taste tests of them. And it is just
Nice.
so refreshing and so much fun. Minimalist Baker, she's a great one. I know a lot of people have heard of her, but she is mainly plant-based, but she does incorporate animal products into a lot of her meals. So she has a lot of variety on her channel, which can be helpful for you if you're slowly making the transition, because
Hmm.
she does fish, she does chicken on occasion, and very open and very just an open-minded person and wonderful recipes. Pick up limes. If anybody has, uh, well, I'll just jump into the fact that she is a dietitian, but she is just a breath of fresh air when it comes to the dietitian world, where a lot of her videos aren't even really focused on what components of these foods are the most healthy for us, where we'll break
Mm,
down that this food has vitamin C and vitamin C is good for this reason, where a lot of that information is really helpful, but sometimes not applicable, right? We're eating the full meal, we're not just eating the vitamin C. And so
hmm.
she really looks at nutrition with a well-rounded perspective. And of course, her recipes are incredible. I love all of them. So, and they all have YouTube channels. So
Oh, nice.
they
Yeah,
make it
that last one you
really fun.
says. Repeat that last one more time.
Pick up limes.
Okay, perfect.
Also pretty funny and catchy.
Yeah.
So those are a few of my favorite recommendations. Obviously, Oriant has the health coaching program. My health coaching program that I do on the side is specifically towards people who are wanting to adopt a more plant-based diet. I also do plant-based cooking classes, and my cooking classes are personalized. So it's if you have a group of people that are wanting to do a fun girls' night or a family night or whatever, and you want to learn a new skill, that's when you would contact me and I would create a cooking class for you and come either do it in your home or go to a kitchen that we rent out and do cooking classes. I also teach for UVU. Um, if anybody here is in Utah, I teach for the UVU community ed classes, and I do all the plant-based cooking classes for them, which they've just started incorporating this year. So
Nice.
yeah,
Nice. Lindsay, how can people get hold of you? If they're, wanting to do a cooking class for the holidays, how can they get hold of you?
absolutely. So they can visit my website, which is level-upnutrition.com. And all my information will be there. I have a Facebook page, Instagram page as well. I also do
Awesome.
nutrition coaching for my husband's company, who works with kids with ADHD, autism, learning disabilities, things like that. It's a focus on the education side, but there's a supplemental nutrition side as well.
Oh my gosh, we didn't even go into that. That's a whole nother
No,
podcast
that's
on
a
how
whole
nutrition
nother
can help with that.
podcast.
But oh my gosh, I love
I
it.
know.
There's there's a whole nother episode. That is so fantastic. So like I said to all of our listeners, I will put all those resources into the show notes. And again, it's always a place to start. I think we're always grasping for, when we're searching Google, what is actually valid and what isn't, and what's a good resource and what isn't. So again, from a true expert who's plant-based, these are Lindsay's recommendations, which again is always a great place to start. So Lindsay, thank you so much for your time and expertise
Absolutely.
and recommendations. Sorry about the computer glitch earlier, but we're here, we're
That's
back, we
okay.
made it, and people know how to get hold of you. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
It's
for
been a
having me.
pleasure. To all of our listeners, we'll be back next month with our final episode of our diabetes prevention series this year. And could not be any more perfect. We're going to be talking about stress management and de-stressing for diabetes prevention. So goes right along with it for the holidays. So thank you so much again. Check out the show notes, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.